Do you think people should be forced to take the vaccine? Maybe forced is the wrong word, but ultimately, should they be?
Just very funny on this, from my point of view, the weird thing also is it's 16 weeks, which is 4 months. I mean, and that's I assume for your first jab.
Yeah.
So I would hope that in 4 months' time, we've got a position where actually we've reached some type of normality where, you know, enough people have been vaccinated that even those that don't or feel hesitant about it don't really make that much of a difference.
Well, actually, those who are being taken sick after having the vaccine have either only had the first jab or they're relatively old and have lots of pre-existing conditions, and that is the setting of a care home. So in my view, I have to say...
As I say, I definitely think you're definitely going to have views at home. It's a really interesting topic. It's pretty controversial, clearly, and we do want to hear from you. Anyway, here's what else is going on today. The number of migrants attempting to cross the English Channel this year who were detained by Border Force has topped 5,000. The number intercepted yesterday alone was 110. The Home Office said that criminal gangs are putting profits before people's lives through these dangerous and unnecessary crossings. Earlier this week, I spoke to the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, and this is what she had to say.
Strikes against Hamas earlier this morning. They say that it was a response to the launching of incendiary you can actually trust. I mean, what do you think, Darren? I mean, do you feel strong about the police? I mean,
well, this is the front page of the Mail today.
Yeah.
I mean, lots of the focus is on Carissa Dick, of course, who is still the current, rather embattled, it must be said, Met Commissioner. You know, she's essentially fighting for her job this morning. I mean, this case is pretty horrific. It goes back a long time. And, you know, the conclusion yesterday from Nuala Alone, who's carried out an investigation, is that the police just didn't properly investigate this because they feared the damage it would do to the Met's reputation.
Well, on there it even talks of
different experiences, haven't we, of the police and the way they handle things. I haven't got any reason to complain. Darren,
I just think sometimes it's
very difficult to get
quite easy.
You can't get to speak to anyone.
These guys are on the front line, literally doing their jobs. But in this case, you know,
this is not good.
We need answers, and
not good.
I think the pressure on Carissa Dick is only going to grow in the days to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, coming up, we continue our great British road trip with Rosie Wright, who's in, we hope it's sunny, it was a bit cloudy then, Skegness. We'll have a look at today's front pages as well.
Very welcome back to the Great British Breakfast. Now, how much of your salary do you spend on council tax? Chances are you probably think it's way too much, don't you? Well, according to a new report, council tax costs Brits on average 7.3% of their income, and some of Britain's less affluent areas face a higher council tax burden than wealthy metropolitan London boroughs. So let's have a look at how it all breaks down. Here are some examples.
If you look at it in a different way, if you do live in Islington and London, honestly, things are so much more expensive. And not only that, I suspect because they've got a much larger population, there's...
on the front pages, we're going to have a quick run through, and today's Western Mail, Welsh national paper, of course, leads with, I think we can have a look, the headline, Corruption and Cover-Up. There we are.
Newspaper, which is essentially a rant from the Ab Fab star Jennifer Saunders, who takes on this sense about, which I have to say I entirely agree about, that you cannot, and there's gentle criticism of this all the time, and this kind of modern thing that when someone says, oh, sorry, you can't say that, she says, oh, F off, essentially. She said it's not a crime to have an opinion or to say something. It's always petty and small-mindedness that kind of peeves her off, and the bigotry and small-mindedness. And she says that's what you find in our kind of modern society, where people feel that they can't really necessarily say what they all want to say all of the time because they fear that people are going to be offended.
Well, we'll be telling you what inspired one woman to get on board. She's a true inspiration. So stay tuned. Also get in touch with regard to taking the vaccine at GB News, should you be forced to do it. Good morning, you're watching the Great British Breakfast. Now, I've got a question for you. Would you be tempted to be strapped to the wing of a plane at 1,000 feet? Well, would you?
No. Well, is the honest answer.
Petrified of heights, but anyway.
Well, it's more being strapped. I mean, put me in the top of a building, but strapped to a plane.
It's been strapped up, is that what it is? It's been strapped to something.
It's very early in the morning for that, Nana.
Well, I wasn't thinking like that. I was just thinking, well, keep it clean, it's in your mind. well, Deborah Battams and her husband have decided to take the plunge, all in the name of charity. Deborah was born with cystic fibrosis.
Why? There's something very, very scary.
I mean, the good thing is, I suppose, you can't actually move. So I think, having talked about it, they were starting to think, oh, Oh.
What are we doing?
Yeah, you could hear it in his voice.
Poor Neil. I know, you could see the cogs turning, really. No, well done, guys.
Very
And
impressive.
thank you for coming on.
Right, let's have a look at what else is going on today in the news. And the number of migrants attempting to cross the English Channel this year and who were detained by the Border Force has now topped 5,000. The number intercepted yesterday alone was 110. Now, the Home Office has said in a statement that criminal gangs are putting profits before people's lives through these dangerous and unnecessary crossings, but many are quite critical of the Home Office and indeed the Home Secretary that they're not doing enough to stop it. This is what Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, had to say to me a little earlier this week.
Of incendiary balloons that led to fires in the fields.
Lacks transparency and urgently needs reform. This is the verdict of the government's Public Accounts Committee MP Meg Hillier, who is the chair of the committee. She said younger and older adults needing care and home care have seen decades of neglect, and the 1.5 million who work in care deserve much better.
Now, British farmers have expressed concerns that animal welfare standards could be undermined by the UK's newly announced free trade deal with Australia. Boris Johnson has insisted that the deal will benefit farmers who are worried that they could be undercut by cheaper imports. However, the National Farmers Union want more information on how the UK farming industry will be protected.
It's interesting that, isn't it, actually, that many farmers are saying that
the UK has the highest council tax burden, and will also be joined by a Labour MP who wants to make it illegal for companies to fire and then rehire workers. But first, a quick look at the day's weather. Looks like today is the last day, sadly, of hot weather for a little while.
Scorchio.
Good morning. This is the Great British Breakfast. You're watching GB News. But now for a royal roundup. The Queen's reaction to what other world leaders thought of her at the G7 summit last week was priceless.
Very, very good. Were they really?
I love her.
But she's so
It's
cute,
wonderful.
isn't she? She's wonderful.
She is
brilliant
wonderful.
woman.
Well, it turns out the Queen has a very, very long-term memory when it comes to her life's passion, which is horses. ITV Racing were given a personal insight into the Queen's lifelong interest in thoroughbreds from her...
Long
I
time
can't
ago.
remember when it was. We'll have to look into that. But it was sad that she missed the first day. But she will be there this week, of course.
Oh, she will?
She will, but that was the first day. She's there. So, oh no, I'm sure she'll be there.
Yeah, yeah.
At some point.
Well, some royals were there because we know that Prince Charles and Camilla gave racegoers something to cheer when they arrived by car and not the traditional carriage procession.
Like racing? Quickly, moving on.
Do I like racing? Not really. I mean,
What about Royal Ascot,
I've been
though? What
to
a
the
wonderful
races quite a
event.
lot. The problem is what happens to me is I go to these racing events. So next time I go,
Well, yeah,
Nana you are
I
coming
listened
with
to
me.
tips from people. I chatted to people, and they said, "Oh, I'm going to go for that one." And I just listened to what the majority was saying, and I went along with it, and ended up making money.
But it is lovely to see Royal
very good
Ascot
fun
back,
as well.
isn't it? I think that's the. I mean, I live relatively near that area, and the buzz. You can feel that sort of the buzz of Ascot and people back, and it's just wonderful.
And I think you were saying yesterday that actually it's kind of the start.
He's had an operation on his knee, but he pulled out to preserve his body for Wimbledon, so we'll see him out there.
And Tim Henman, oh, he's...
No, Tim Henman's not.
He's gone, isn't he?
He
See, that's what I
retired
mean.
quite a long time
That's what I
ago.
mean.
Even I know Tim Henman's not around.
We're so fickle, though, don't we? Because we had Henman Hill, and then suddenly it's get rid of Andy Murray Hill now. Who's next? Who's next?
Murray's Mound, wasn't it?
Murray's Mound.
Is it? You see?
Whatever.
Well, we're so fickle.
Should we bring in some of the texts and tweets we're getting
Let's
in
do that.
regards to the top story today that we've been talking about, this kind of controversial decision when it comes to whether care home staff should essentially be jabbed or face the prospect of losing their job. Alison's got in touch saying that she thinks it's outrageous, and she says that how do you think that new recruits, new nurses and care staff will react? She says that we are turning into a dictatorship, Matt Hancock. Someone else suggesting that at this stage any key workers in care should be fully vaccinated.
Absolutely.
And they probably should get their second jab actually back in April. But lots of people not very happy about this. Richard saying we're slowly sleepwalking into a very dangerous society. Most are advocating for a sinister country. Freedom
That's
of
not what
choice
it's about, is it?
freedom of choice of one's body is what should be protected. And finally,
If it affects others, not necessarily.
if the patients who've been vaccinated, there is no need for staff to be
work like
forced. It's notoriously difficult to get good quality care home staff. no good will come from attempting to enforce mandatory vaccination. So a bit of a divide there, but there's clearly lots of concern.
Well, there's a lot of concern, and I'm not really surprised at all. I mean, what do you think? At GB News, get in touch. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Should we actually insist that people who work in the care setting be vaccinated?
Let us know. Now, don't miss Andrew Neil tonight from 8 o'clock. He is going to be joined by Chancellor of the Exchequer, I should say. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cough today. Not COVID. Rishi Sunak. Send your questions in for the Chancellor. Also, email gbviews, gbnews.uk. Also, put Rishi Sunak in the subject title, and we will get those out. And not content with just one Chancellor on today after 9 o'clock this morning, Colin Brazier and Mercy Muroki are joined by the former Chancellor, Sajid Javid. So don't miss that. So they're going to be a good night on Andrew Neil's show.
And by Liz Truss as well, who of course is the International Development Secretary who signed this trade deal with Australia. So that's kind of quite good to look forward to.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's going to be really interesting tonight hearing from the Chancellor, because it's all about what's happening with the furlough scheme. Should there be continued support for businesses, given what's happened in regards to the extension of the restrictions for another 4 weeks? And also kind of what's happening with the economy, because we've got the inflation figures actually just about to come out in around a couple of minutes' time. And we're speaking to Liam Halligan, our economics editor, about that. Because there is concern that inflation is going to shoot through the roof with this economic recovery. So quite a lot going on. 8 p.m, Andrew Neil, Rishi Sunak. It's going to be pretty unmissable, I would reckon.
But should we be forcing people to take the jab? I think if you work as a carer, then yes, possibly. But what do you think? Tweet us at GB News.
Some of the lowest paid Brits are paying the highest percentage of the wages on council tax, with some people in Blackpool paying 10% of their annual salary on that council tax. Pretty staggering story this. We'll have more details on that later.
In Great British news, Nissan has started a new car production project in Sunderland that will support 24,000 shops. I used to go to university in Sunderland. Lovely by the sea.
Very nice.
It's going to be fabulous today there. Now, it's a huge triumph for Britain's post-Brexit industry.
Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast. Let's move on to this really interesting story about council tax and how much of your salary do you spend on council tax. Now, but still, that is an awful lot of your money going on council tax. That's aside from your income tax and everything else.
But it's too high, but you've got to put it into perspective. In London, it's extremely expensive. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Definitely this one, which is at the front page of The Sun. It is from Jennifer Saunders saying that small-minded brigade is ruining comedy like hers, suggesting that it's ab-drab Britain and that ab-fab wouldn't be allowed to be made today because it's, would be viewed as offending too many people.
You can't say anything. It's a great inside a double-page spread, isn't it? And she's actually quite outspoken, Jennifer, in this article.
She's saying she's really had quite a lot of this stuff. Actually, is a modern thing. She's pretty peeved off, as she continues to say, and wants to know that people should just be able to speak their minds. You don't want to get around the place where you can't say that, you can't say that. She says, F off to that. I don't want to listen to that. And says it's not a crime to have an opinion, to say something. And it's always the small-minded, bigoted people that really, really annoy her. And ultimately, she has got a point in the sense that you do hear it time and time again when people go, you can say that. And you're like, people are too easily...
He was fabulous. Good morning to you, Rosie. She's